So we're on Ayin Aleph Amid Beis. We had brought from the Mishnah, the Gemara explained the Mishnah, that we said if a Goyish lender lends money to a Yid, he lends money to Reuven, and then Reuven has enough money to pay it back, but he lent it with ribbis, which is fine. You're allowed to borrow from a non-Jew with ribbis. You can pay ribbis to the non-Jew. Reuven's ready to pay up. He doesn't want to continue paying. He doesn't want ribbis to continue piling up. So he goes to his friend Shimon, asks if he could take over the loan and he'll become the new owner. So if the Nachri is aware of it, then it's allowed because it's treated as if now it's a new loan from Shimon, where Shimon owes money to the guy instead of Shimon owing the money to Reuven and then Reuven paying it to the non-Jew. So then the problem would be if it's just if the original lender, who's a non-Jew, is not aware that the loan is being transferred from Reuven to Shimon, so then there's really two separate loans. There's a loan from Shimon to Reuven, and then Reuven has a loan to the non-Jew. But the problem is the loan from Shimon to Reuven is problematic. It's a loan with ribbis. So we had asked, how can you do such a thing? Why does it help that the non-Jew, the original lender, is aware that Reuven is transferring the loan to Shimon? He can't make Reuven his shliach to transfer it over to Shimon, because there's no shlichus by a guy. So what the Gemara is going to say, we said one teretz is talking about where he put it on the ground, or he gave it over to where Reuven had given the money to the non-Jew, and then the non-Jew gave it over to the Yid. So therefore, it wasn't shlichus; it was paying back the non-Jew, and then the non-Jew starting a new loan. So up to Rav Ashi Amar, about 20 lines up from the bottom. Rav Ashi Amar, it's true that there's a din of ein shlichus and nachri, hani mili b'truma, but that's limited only to the din of truma. We learn out in general the din of truma, of shlichus from truma, when someone wants to appoint someone else to separate his truma. And we also learn the limitation that shlichus only applies to a yid, not to a non-yid. Av b'chol ha'Torah kuli yesh shlichus l'nachri. Rav Ashi seems to be saying that you can, unless you're talking about truma, you can use a guy can appoint someone else to be a shliach. This is not a correct pshat. This is a pshat that was not accepted in the base medrash. Maishna truma deloi. Why is it that by truma you can't appoint a non-Jew to be a shliach? The says atem gam atem. The pasuk says, "Kein tarimu gam atem trumas Hashem mikol maser yisechem." So we darshan ma atem b'nei bris af shulchachem b'nei bris. We say, just like when we say the Gam tells you, Gam, that not just you can separate you, but you could also appoint a shliach, but we make a drasha that Atem, you, referring to you, just like you are the only ones who can be a shliach, only Yidden, just like you're the one who, just like you are a Bnei Bris, when with the person we're referring to, the person who's separating the Truma, the person who has Truma that has to be separate, a guy doesn't have Truma. So just like you, the owner of the truma has to be Bnei Bris, your shliach also has to be a Bnei Bris, has to be a Jew. So shlichut dekala terkula not be truma gamin le. The Gemara says, and the whole din of shlichus comes from truma. So since this is the source for the whole din of shlichus, the restriction that is written into truma that can only buy a yid also will apply. So therefore, Rav Ashi's suggested teretz is not valid. You can't say that in the case of a lender who's a guy trying to transfer over a loan with ribbis to a different yid, that there's going to be shlichus. It doesn't make any sense because the whole din. We wanted to say, Rav Ashi wanted to say that only applies, the din of shlichus being limited to yidden is only by truma, but not by other types of shlichus. Where says it's not true. Al Rasha Bedusi. Ikadamri Amr Ravashi, Kiamri Neshilchus Nachri, a different way of limiting the rule of that there's no shlichus for a nachri. Hanimili inu l'didan. That's only when we are making them into a shliach. We're saying a guy himself cannot be a shliach of a yid. Aval anan l'ditu, but maybe a guy could appoint someone to be a shliach. Well, they can't. They don't have enough probity and veracity to be shluchim themselves, but they still can be someone who appoints a yid to be a shliach. Aval nan l'ditu havinu lu shliach. So that would explain how the shliach, the guy is making the Ruvain into a shliach to transfer over the loan. So this is also not an acceptable shot. Maishna inu l'didan, the loy. Why is it that they can't be a shliach for us? Atem gamatem l'rabba shluchachem atem bnei bris. Af shluchachem bnei bris. We learn that just like you are just like you are a bnei bris, the one who's making the shliach to separate the truma, so too your shliach has to be a bris. Anam dunami ma'atem bnei bris kama. The whole thing starts from because we're saying we compare the shliach to you yourself, the one who's making the shliach, and the atem certainly has to be a yid. So in that case, the person making a shliach also has to be a yid. So we'll learn if anything, it's more reason to believe that there's a restriction that the person appointing the shlichus, where the Torah says atem, and atem is always going to be only a yid, l'gabi truma. So certainly, you won't be able to appoint a guy won't be able to appoint a shliach. Elhoder Rasha Berusi. So we're going to think of another potential shot. Avinu Amar, need the shlichus anachi Leslie. While it's true that there's no shlichus for a non-Jew, zechiyah midirabanan isle. However, there is zechiyah, meaning he can be zeicha to someone else. Maybe they have a cotton, just like a cotton. Cotton avagav the lesle shlichus. A cotton, even though a cotton cannot appoint someone to be a shliach, isle zechiyah, he does have someone can be zeicha on him. Like in Rashi bringing the time, Zachal l'katan beperik mishameis. And Bava we say clearly you can be zeicha on behalf of a cotton. So too, someone could be zeicha on behalf of a guy. So over here, when Reuven is conveying the money that he owes to the guy, to Shimon, and he's saying, okay, I want to be, and the guy is standing there and he's saying, this is a good idea. So Shimon will now be zeicha in the guy's money, the money that was owed from Reuven to the guy, and he's going to be zeichet on behalf of the guy, and then he's going to now owe the money to the guy. So it's a schia. Hachanami leishno. So the marvelahi, but it's not really a good comparison. Although a cotton can be zeicha, even though he's not in the Torah of shlichus, Yisrael asi l'chal shlichus. A cotton, even though he currently cannot be a shliach, when he'll grow up, he'll be able to be a shliach. So therefore, schia is possible by him. Since a schia, the Gemaras understand that schia, being zeicha in something, is a subset. It's a subcategory of shlichus. So a cotton who has the potential to eventually make shluchim and be a shliach, so he can also be. You can be zeicha on his behalf. Akum le'asi l'chlal shlichus. However, akum is entirely precluded from ever either making a shliach or becoming a shliach. Obviously, if it becomes a yid, that's a new person. This guy could cut to dummy, but as long as he's a guy, he's not shayach to shlicha. So therefore, he doesn't even have the ability of a cotton to have someone be zeicha on his behalf. Tanuraban. So that I guess we'll have to go back to our first teretz. We'll have to go back to the original teretz that we're talking about, where he gave the money where Reuven gave the loan, he gave it back to the non-Jewish lender, and then that lender gave it to Shimon.
So isn't that a brand new loan?
That was what the Gemara asks. What's the chiddush of that? L'chayr, it's a brand new loan. And we said because the Yid because Reuven gave it to the non-Jew to give it to Shimon, it might be looked upon that the non-Jewish lender is a shliach of Reuven. He's just doing what Reuven asked him to do. It wouldn't be looked upon as if it's a return to the lender, and then the lender's giving out money for a new loan. That was the Gemara.
That was the original assumption.
Right. That was the original question. Yeah. And the Gemara says no. It's of course if you put it down on the ground, if you give it back, if you pay back to the non-Jewish lender, and then the next day he makes a new loan, obviously that there's no connection to you. Even though this is all done in one shot, it's still looked upon as two separate transactions. Like you say, it's treated like a new loan. Tan Rabban. Yisrael shalava moyis min hanachir. Reuven borrowed money from a non-Jewish lender, the ribis. And he made ribis. He said he borrowed $100, and he said, I have to pay you back a year later with 10% per year. And after a year, he said they wrote a star which says that now I, Reuven, owe this non-Jewish lender $110. So they consolidated the loan and they made a star and they said this is now a note of indebtedness that says that I owe this full amount. The Niskaya. And after subsequent to that, the Niskaya, well, we'll see if it was subsequent, and the guy was Niskaya. Im Kaidim Shiniskaya, Zakvan Alav B'Milva. If the changing of the original loan with the 10% interest was put into a star and changed into a debt, in that case, since it was converted, there was nothing wrong with what they did. You're allowed to borrow from a non-Jew with interest, and he changed it into a debt that he now owes this amount, and then later on this non-Jew became a Yid. Now, obviously there's no such thing. There's no problem with when a person goes from being a non-Jew to a Jew. It doesn't cancel out his loans. He still owes or cancel out whatever money is owed to him. He still is owed the money, but it's not a loan with ribis. It's just a debt. It's a pure debt. So therefore, it could be gaiva the whole 110. Then this new Jew, this Avram, can be gaiva the entire debt. But if it was left as a loan with an interest payment, and it wasn't consolidated into a different debt, then gaiva sakar ve'ena gaiva ribis. You can't be gaiva the ribis because it's now ribis being paid. It's a loan of $100, and now this new Avram, this new Yid is trying to collect an additional $10 for ribis. He can't do so. The other way around, a Nachri borrowed money from a Yid with ribis, and it was converted into a note, Nisgaya, and then the borrower was Nisgaya. If it's now just a note that says that he owes $110, a star that says he owes $110, the Yid can go take the money, the entire amount, from this newly converted Yid. However, if it remained in the form of a loan of $100 plus a ribis payment of $10, he can't be gaiva the ribis because this ribis is now being imposed on the loan of $100 while he's a Yid.
He has an incentive to be his guy.
Oh, so you're mechaven to the Gemara. A non-Jew who borrowed money from a Yid with ribis. In either case, the Yid, the original Yid, can be gaiva from this newly converted Yid, even the ribis, even if it was nisgayer, and afterwards he hadn't yet changed it into a note. Amarav Chizda, Amarav Huna, halacha Rabbi Yosi. Halacha like Rabbi Yosi. Amarav, in my time of the Rabbi Yosi. What's the reason of a Yosi? Kadesh lo yamru b'shmo oisin nisgayer zeh. We don't want that people will, like our friend Rafal just did, they'll cast aspersions on the gerus. They'll say this guy was in Hak, and he, it was this Jewish loan shark who was into him for like $1 million of ribbis. And he said, I got a good way of getting out of it. I'll be in this guy, and then he won't be able to charge the ribbis. Therefore, they were mechayiv him to pay the ribbis, so in order that you shouldn't cause that the gerus would be brought into question.
Even though it's technically speaking usher to do that.
Yeah. It's hefka bez and hefka. We always say Chacham could do whatever they want monetarily without there's never any restrictions on their ability to transfer money or whatever for a good reason. Tan Rabban, shtar shekasa by ribbis, a shtar that has ribbis written into it, a shtar that says I'm going to pay $100 and it's going to accrue 10% per year. We cancel him, we penalize the lender. Meir says, not only can't you collect the ribbis, the obviously interest is also, and you're not allowed to collect it, but you can't even be goiva the keren. So the Rishonim all talk about, does that mean that your mamish can't get back your money that you borrowed, that you lent? Doesn't really make that much. That's a severe penalty. So there's some Rishonim say that it just means that he can't use the shtar to be goiva from nechasim mishubadim. Right? Normally, when someone lends money and the borrower, after the loan was entered into, sells property, if the lender then comes to get the borrower to pay back and he doesn't have money, he can go take from sold properties. So it's saying that when we say you can't be goiva the keren, it means you can't be goiva it from nechasim mishubadim. But others say it means mamash you can't collect anything. You just take the whole star and throw it in the trash. Chacham say no. The only consequence is that he can't take ribbis, but he can certainly be goiva the original loan. But my cometh, Rameir holds, even though the loan itself is not a problem, you're allowed to. It's not just you're allowed to. You're supposed to lend money, but we penalize the loan. We penalize the lender that he can't get the loan. It's interesting that even though there's an isser, like we said, both for the lender and for the borrower, for the edim and for everyone involved, but we're penalizing the lender, even though the borrower also did something wrong. Maybe we should penalize him that he has to pay double ribbis. But like we saw before, in a case where where the lender is not chayiv on ribbis, then the borrower is also, like we said, if there's a lender who's a guy, whatever the case may be. But the point is there is certainly a focus on the lender, that he's the one who is at fault. Just an observation.
He's the only one benefiting.
Well, I guess the borrower was also benefiting because he probably wouldn't have gotten the loan without paying the ribbis. But you're right. There's a direct benefit to the lender, as opposed to he's more subject to a penalty. It would make sense that he should be the one penalized. Tanan Hasan. I think Shtori Choiv HaMukdamin. A shtar choiv that's mukdam. So we had discussed before that a shtar choiv, when Ruvain borrows money from Shimon, if Ruvain then sells his property, Shimon is allowed to go back to and at the end of the term of the loan comes and Shimon wants to get his money from Reuven, and Reuven doesn't have. Shimon can go to the people who bought property from Reuven after the loan was entered into, and he could take. There's a lien on any property of Reuven's, and even if Reuven sold it, he can go and take from him. So shtar chayv hamukdamim. If someone wrote a date on the shtar that was earlier than the date and the loan was entered into, psulin, it's possible because we're concerned, right? We don't want the lender to be able to take properties from people who bought from Reuben prior to the loan being entered into. But this lender is going to present a shtar that has, let's say the shtar says on September 1st, this loan was entered into, and the loan was really entered into on January 1st. So the lender has a document that says that the loan was entered into on September 1st. So any properties that Reuven sold between September and January that are really not supposed to be subject to this lien will become subject to the lien. So the Chum say it's possible. But if you make it later, then there's no fear. What is the lender? It's not going to help the lender to have a loan that says that it's entered into later. It just protects the lekuchas at the expense of the lender. And if the lender is willing to accept such a document, so he's being meichel on that. Mukdamin amai psulin. In fact, the Gemara, why is a loan that's predated? Why is it possible? Why do we say the entire debt, the entire shtar is possible? Even though you can't collect from it starting from September, let this lender use this document and just restrict them and say you can't use it from the time that's written on the shtar. You can only be gaiva from the time that you entered into the loan. Amr Shimon b'machloika shinuya. So Rav Shimon Rish Lakish understands that this is dependent on the machlokes that we just discussed. Ramehi, it's going according to Rameir, who says we impose a penalty on a heter even because of the iser. So even though it is mutter for the lender, we could theoretically, let's say, we could write onto the loan that this loan is only going to be able to be gaiva from shubadim from the later date. Well, we gaiva, we penalize and we say that the lender can't use such a. We don't want such a shtar to exist, so we penalize it and we say you can't use it at all. No, it could even be according to Rabbanan. We're concerned. I'm sorry. We're talking about. We're not suggesting you write on the loan, but we're saying that he could. We're going to tell the. We're going to say that the lender can't use this loan prior to when the loan was entered into. But the problem is, he'll present this note to the lekuchas, someone who bought from Ruvain between September and January, and this purchaser will not know that he should go to Bezdin to check. He's not going to go to the Secretary of State who records loans. He's not going to know to check on it, and maybe he'll get caught up and he'll just give him back the property when he really shouldn't. That's why, in that case, it's not just a matter of being penalizing that it shouldn't be kosher at all, because we're worried that in spite of the rule that he can't use it to be gaiva, it might anyway end up being used. It might be misleading and allow a lender to take from the kuchs. Hahu gavra, the mashkin le pardisa lechavra. So this is a complicated case, somewhat complicated, and we have to at first just separate these two parts. There's a story, and then there's after the story, there's how they dealt with it. Who gave the mashkin le pardisa lechavra? There was a person who gave up. Ruvain borrowed money from Shimon, and he gave a pardes, a orchard, as collateral on the debt. The orchard was worth $5,000, and the debt was $1,000. Achol tlashni, and they made it. They arranged this debt. It wasn't a problem of ribbis. He could eat from and the lender was allowed to hold on to the mashkin, and it wasn't. It was like structured, like we said before, like a sale. And the lender Shimon was allowed to eat the peiros of this field, and he ate it for 3 years. Now, those of us who have learned Bava Basra know the 3 years is a faithful time, that's when you have a chazakah. So Shimon has a very good leverage position on this field. If he wants this field, all he really has to do is take the shtar and dispose of it and say it's mine, and Reuben's going to have a hard time proving that it doesn't belong to Shimon. Amalei, but Shimon wasn't quite so, he wasn't so bad. He wasn't such a horrible person. But he was a bad guy. Amalei, he went to Reuven, he said, if you're going to sell me this field, mutav, then okay, then good. I want to buy this field. I'm not interested in you paying back the $1,000 and then me giving back this field. I've been enjoying it. I want to keep it for myself. I'm willing to pay you $5,000 for the field, and I want to buy it from you. Reuven had no interest in this. Reuven wasn't looking to sell the field. He wanted to pay back his loan and get it back. But Shimon said to him, I want to buy it. But if you don't, kavishna lo l'shtar mashkanta. I'm going to throw away the shtar that says that there's a loan and this is a mashkin. And then I'll tell everyone I already bought it 3 years ago. And look, I was a masak in it, and you never protested. Now Reuven really did the wrong thing. He should have lodged a protest every 2.5 years, and before 3 years were up, saying that, by the way, even though Shimon is holding on to it, everyone should know that it's still mine. But he didn't do so. So now he had a very poor position. And Shimon was saying, you have two choices. Sell it to me, or else I'm just going to take it, and you're going to have a hard time proving that it's not mine. So Reuven was quite devious. And this is really weird. This is all this is all the background, which is not really relevant all the way till the end of the Gemara. But now is where the halachic part starts. Azal kam akne libnoi kata. Reuven went and he made a quiet sale of this property. This property still belongs to him. This was just a threat of Shimon in the meantime. He's saying, sell it to me or else I'm going to take it. But he hasn't taken it yet. And Reuven went and sold the property to his son, his young son. He figured that way I'll still be able to control the field. V'hadar zavna nehalei. And then he turned around and sold the property to Shimon. He sold it twice. First, he sold it like, what's his name? Like Madison title. He first sold it to his son, and then the next day, he sold it. Rafal knows what I'm talking about. And then the next day, he went and he sold it to Shimon, which is obviously a farce. You can't sell something twice. Once it's sold to his son, he is in no position to sell. So Zakma, Zvini vade lehavi zvini. This sale is certainly not a sale. You can't sell something that's not yours. It now belongs to his son. The father is not able to sell it. Zuzi, but what about the money? Meaning, we're talking about over here, when you sell a property, there's an achrayus. It means Shimon is giving $5,000 for this property. So Reuven is saying there's a implied warranty of title. There's a warranty that says that if it turns out I don't own it, I have achrayus, I have to pay you back for the money that you gave me. So what do we say? What is the status of that achrayus? Do we say zuzi kamalva b'shtar damu? Do we say this sale has the same status as when someone is malva b'shtar, when someone makes a hava on a shtar, which includes with it achrayus, b'gayvim nechasim shubadim? Whenever anyone borrows money, whenever someone lends money, it includes an achrayus, meaning that the person who the lender is able to be gayvim nechasim shubadim if he sells property after the loan was entered into. So similarly here, do we say that this sale also has the status of a milva b'shtar, that the achrayus, the ability to be gaiva from that time, from people who the seller who illegitimately sold it, and now the buyer has a warranty against him, does that warranty have the same status that he could also be gaiva from nechasim mishubadim from anything that was sold by the seller after this sale was entered, this full sale was entered into. Or do we say, no, it's like a milva al peh, when you borrow money without a star, so then there's no achrayas, and if property is sold by the borrower after the loan was entered into, the achrayas does not extend to be able to even take from nechasa mishubadim, from sold property. So this question, Balav Hainu de Ravasi, is this not subject to the question, to the rule of Ravasi? Dam Ravasi, and we've had this before. Where do we have it? On Dav Zayin, and in a bunch of other places. Moide b'shtar shekosvu, someone who's moide. You have a star that, and the question over here, we should really go back a second. The question over here is, this is really a sale with or a shibud with a floor, right? There's something problematic with this with the sale, because obviously there's a big problem with it that it was already previously sold. So the question is, when such a thing happens,
this sale, right? Was there
yeah,
a price written in it, or what are we just implying? Is it an implication that there's a price on it? Because this sale is not the brightest, it seems like.
yeah, I mean, I think a sale has an implied warranty of that it belongs to you. I don't think it
So
has
unless it's written that there is no price, then all sales
Now-
have a price automatically.
right.
And
But-
so now
but
what
over
we're saying
here-
here is since it was a fraudulent document to begin with, the sale was not really intended to be real. Therefore, does that imply the price fall off?
That's the question. The question is, if something, the whole sale was not valid. Now, it's hard to understand. It's a little bit contradictory. The whole point of having achrayis on a sale is that it belongs to you when you sold it. I think it's talking about where it had an actual achrayis on it. I think it's talking about that the sale normally has an achrayis on it. It means it includes a paragraph saying that there was that the seller is going to make good on the money. He's going to pay back the purchaser if it turns out that that the property is taken away from him. Very similar to by a malva. But the problem over here is that this shtar was a invalid shtar. It had achrayis in it, but this achrayis wasn't really worth the paper it was written on, because the whole shtar was invalid.
And how does Rav Asi change that or answer that?
No, he's going to say, listen, it might be flawed. This shtar might not be worth anything, but that's exactly the reason why you put that provision in there for exactly this case. So it might not be a good shtar that you could use to get the property, to say, you owe me the property, because he doesn't have the power to give over the property. But it does provide him with the assurance, with the achrayas, that he should get paid back. So now the Gemara is going to talk about a different case that has a similar type of issue, where you have a document with a flaw, but is nevertheless being able to be used for achrayas. If someone, the din is you always have to be mekayim a shtar, but if you have a shtar that was not mekayim, then if the person who the shtar is against, right, a lender is holding on to a shtar chayv, and the borrower agrees, he's masking that this is a good star, even though it's not Makuyim. Not only can the holder of the star, the lender, use that star to collect money from the borrower, but if the borrower doesn't have money, even though it's not Makuyim, he could use it to be gaiva from properties that the borrower had sold after the loan. So you see that again, this lack of kiyum is a flaw. It's a reyesa in the star, but even so, the assurance that the achrayus in it, that the borrower gives, that the star gives, that he could be given from the chashuv shadam is still valid. So making a dimin, we're saying the same thing over here, even though this star has a reyes in it, because it's the biggest reyes you can have, that it didn't belong to the person who was conveying it, but the achrayus in it is still good. Amalei Rava midami hasam nitli kosef. In the case of Ravasi, a star that wasn't Makuyim, you could just go ahead and be Makayim it. There's nothing wrong with the star be'etzem. It just is missing a technical matter that you need to be Makayim it. So we say that the haidah of the lender, of the borrower, is enough that we can overlook that and continue to use it. Over here, the whole star was not a valid star from the beginning. So that's even Ravasi, who says over there that it's good. Maybe over here he would say you can't use it to be gaiva from Mishubab. He was saying over this disagreement. What Rava had answered to Ravasi and was machal, that since it's loy nitnli kasev, that's the reason why the star over here would not be good, and you can't use it to be gaiva from the chas mishubadim. Amalei Ravina lemaremar el adam Rabbi Yochanan. We said before legabi a star muktam. Zera shem yignu zan rishon nemel nitnli kasev. Rabbi Yochanan said an answer. We asked a question. We wanted to prove from a star muktam that we see a star muktam is no good. It's puzzle on Amud Aleph. We want to bring that as a raya, whether we're consinan hetera atu isura, or we kindness hetelagabi yisur. Why did we say that the reason we wanted to answer over there is because we're worried about that maybe he'll take the star and he'll go be gaiva from somebody, even though he's not allowed to. The lender will use it for someone. We were suggesting that maybe we'll answer him from being gaiva between September and January. We said, but maybe he'll use it anyway. Why do we have to come on to that? Namely, nitnli kasev. If we're saying that something that is not able, it's not allowed to be written, and this star was not allowed to be written from September. You're not allowed to write a star muktam. Let's say that itself is the reason why the whole thing is puzzle. And don't say because of a gzeira. Amalei, so you answered back. Hachi hashta, hasim hidalei nitnli kasem is man rishon, aval nitnli kasem is man sheni. It's not like our case, which is totally, this field that is being sold belonged to someone else. You don't have the ability to sell it. Over there, the star halva was a valid star. It just had the wrong date on it. But from January, there was no problem with it being a loan. So over there we don't say it's a star shloi nitnli kasev. Hachal nitnli kasev klal, but over here it can't be written at all. Practic Gemara also. So another question on this svara that we say the star nitnli kasev can be invalidated. Hold the Tanya l'shvach kakois ketza. So this is talking about. So the Gemara is going to explain what that means. Ruvain stole a field, and he sold it to Shimon. And Shimon then went and made the field. He added things to it, and he grew peiros on it. The shvachim peiros on it. The field was worth $1,000. Now it's worth $1,500 because of all that Shimon put onto it. But then, of course, the person that Reuven had originally stole it from goes and takes the field away from Shimon. Kshu now Shimon's going to go back to Reuven and say, listen, you sold me this field, which you had stolen, and now was taken away from me. You got to pay me. The Karen, the $1,000 that he had paid for the field, he can get from any properties that Reuven had sold after the sale, this invalid sale. But those improvements that are not in the star, there's no achrayus in the original star that covers it. He can only get from Bnei Chayrin. He can only get from Reuven. He can't take from Mishubad. Name Eloi Nitli Kasev. The Gemara asks, how can he be goyva anything from Mishubadim? Let's say this star from Reuven to Shimon, where he sold the stolen field, is an invalid star and should be entirely thrown out. So Gemara says, no, there's an afkamina. Hachi hashta. Is that case the same as our case, where we're saying it's a loy nitli kasev, by the case of a field that was sold prior to it being resold? Pasam ilaman da ama nichalei delay nikrai gazal ilaman da ama nichadelei lekem behem nusa. There's a machlekes in, I think, I don't remember where it is. Where is it? And it's a Gemara where this question is brought, where they L'shvachka is Ketzad and Daf Yudalid earlier, and it's also, I think it's in Bava Basra, this machlekes, where we there's a machlekes about when this seller, when Reuven sells it to Shimon, it's not entirely a fraudulent transaction. Reuven really has in mind that he's going to make good on the sale. And the machlekes is what is his motivation for that? One is that he doesn't want that, even though he stole this field originally from someone else, he doesn't want Shimon to call him a ganef. So his intention is he's going to go back to the original person he stole it from and pay him back and make good on this sale to Shimon. Or because if they find out he's a ganef that he stole originally, Shimon's going to go around telling everyone he's a ganef and he stole me a stolen property. Or it's just a matter of that he doesn't want to. It's very strange. I remember we had this before also. Or it's just that he doesn't want to be called someone lacking integrity, that he doesn't follow through on what he said. He's worried about his transaction to Shimon. Shimon will say, oh, he sold me something, but he didn't come through with it. He doesn't know about any legal niceties about his earlier machlekes where he stole this field. He's just saying, you made up to do something for me and you didn't. So therefore, whatever the reason is, the intention was that he's going to pay the original owner. And then this star will end up being able to be used. This star that now the Shimon is going to try to use to take from Lekuchas, he wants to say it should be a valid star because the robber really did intend to make this a valid star and to make this a valid sale. So it's not an entirely fallacious star that it's loy nitli kasev. But hacha, in our case, we know what the background of this case is, and this is why I said at the beginning we'll come back what the background is. This whole thing was set up just so I think it was Reuven was the person who had originally borrowed the money and given this field to Shimon. Now Shimon's trying to steal it from underneath him. So Reuven came up with the strategy that he sold it to his son in order to avoid having to sell to Shimon. There's no content, there's no substance to the sale at all. All he's trying to do is avoid selling it to Shimon. And his whole goal is to avoid Shimon being able to get it. The star has he's not looking to make it into a real star. So therefore, it's star shalai nitli kasev, and that's why it's totally unable to be used to take away from lekuchas. Okay, we're going to stop over here. I don't know where the time went, but I feel like I say that every single day. Okay, take care. Have a good day.
Have a good day.